There's a moment in sport when you can hear a crowd change its mind. Not shout it, not announce it, just quietly, collectively, switch sides in front of everyone. That happened on center court at Wimbledon on July 6, 2026. And if you only read the headline, you would think you know the story. Center court cheer for Alex Eala instead of Jasmine Paolini. That is technically true, but it is also the smallest, flattest version of what actually happened that afternoon. And the real story is stranger and honestly more moving than the headline. Let's if you were sitting in the upper tier that day, you felt it before either player did. The chairs were that familiar Wimbledon green. The temperature had climbed to 31 degrees. And when the two women walked out for their fourth round match, the applause had already started to lean. It did not lean loudly. Wimbledon crowds do not do loud. Not really. Not even when they are picking a favorite. It leaned the way these crowds always lean, by a fraction of a second here, a beat longer there. The applause for the 21-year-old from the Philippines started just a touch sooner and ran just a touch longer than the applause for the Italian, who had reached this exact final 2 years earlier. Eala noticed. Paolini noticed. Everyone in that stadium noticed. And by the time the match ended, 2 hours and 22 minutes later, the scoreboard would say one thing while the room, if you listen closely, had already said something else 3 hours before. To understand why a center court crowd behaved this way, you need to go back 2 days to July 4th. That Saturday, Eala walked onto that same court as a 29 seed, ranked in the low 30s in the world, across the net from IGA Swiatek, the defending Wimbledon champion and a 6-time Grand Slam winner. Nobody outside her own team expected much. What happened, instead, was one of the biggest upsets of the tournament. Eala took the first set in an absolute classic of a tiebreak, 11 points to 9, after 85 minutes of back-and-forth tennis that had the whole court on its feet. Swiatek had chances. She saved 2 set points along the way. It did not matter. Eala broke her spirit as much as her serve and closed out 7-6, 6-2 in 2 hours and 14 minutes. When it was over, she fell to her knees in tears. On court afterward, still catching her breath, she said something that tells you everything about what this run meant to her. She said that for someone like IGA, who has won so many slams, a win like this might look small. But for a girl who grew up in the Philippines training with her brother and her grandfather after school in ruffled socks, this was enormous. That win made history. Eala became the first player from the Philippines, man or woman, to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam in the Open era, a stretch of professional tennis going back to 1968. 58 years of majors had come and gone without a Filipino name reaching that stage. And then, on a Saturday afternoon in London, it happened. By Monday morning, Wimbledon's own YouTube channel had logged well over 1 million views on the highlight package from that Swiatek match, more than double what videos from the same tournament featuring names like Novak Djokovic and Serena Williams had drawn in the same window. The Philippine president publicly praised her. Watch parties were organized across the country. This was not a niche tennis story anymore. It had broken out into something much bigger, and it had done it in about 48 hours. And so by the time Eala walked back out on Monday to face Paolini, the crowd she was walking into was not a neutral crowd. It was a crowd that already knew her name, that already decided, somewhere in the space between Saturday and Monday, that it wanted to see more. Here's where the story needs to be told carefully, because a headline can promise more than the match itself actually delivered. Paolini did not lose this match. Paolini won it. The scoreline was 6-4, 4-6, 6-3, and it sent her into her first Grand Slam quarterfinal in 2 years. In her on-court interview afterward, she thanked Roger Federer, who was watching from the royal box. In her press conference, she talked about joy being her superpower. There is no footage of her glaring at the stands. There is no quote of her complaining about the noise. If anything, what she said afterward suggests she had already made peace with what was coming before she ever stepped on court. Because here is a detail that changes the whole shape of the story. Before the match, in a clip that circulated on the Tennis Channel, Paolini herself said out loud that she expected the Wimbledon crowd to be behind Eala. She saw it coming. She named it before it happened, and then she still had to walk out and play through it. This is not the story of a great player being blindsided and betrayed by a crowd she thought belonged to her. This is the story of a crowd for one afternoon, adopting somebody new, and both women knowing before the first ball was even served. And it is worth saying plainly, because it is easy to lose in the framing, that Paolini has real history and real affection built up on this exact court. 2 years earlier, in 2024, this same center court crowd fell for her completely during her run to the final, where she lost to Barbara Krejcikova. Her personality, her energy, the way she plays with visible joy, all of that earned her something like home advantage on English grass. She has equity here, built over years, not days. And for one round, on one day in one summer, that equity got outvoted by a 21-year-old who had spent the previous 48 hours becoming a phenomenon in the very specific way that only Wimbledon, in its second week, can manufacture. And so what did the crowd actually do? Once the match began, it cheered hard when Eala looked tense in the very first service game, and it stayed with her when she held. It stayed patient as her first serve, usually one of her strengths, started missing more often than it landed, sometimes barely clearing the net. It watched her drop the first set 6-4 and did not turn away. And then, early in the second set, when she found herself facing break points and had to dig in, when she saved those chances, broke back, and built herself a lead, center court finally let go completely. Reporters sitting close to the court that day described loud, sustained chance of let's go, Alex, rolling down from the stands. That is the sound of the tilt. That is the actual moment people mean when they talk about this match. And it was not a moment of betrayal. It was a moment of recognition. IT is also worth pointing out how rare this kind of adoption really is at Wimbledon. This court does not fall for players overnight very often. It did not happen for Emma Raducanu until she was already deep into a major run of her own. It did not happen fully for Coco Gauff during her Wimbledon debut. It did not happen completely for Paolini herself until she was already in the semifinal, back in 2024. Alex Eala got adopted in the round of 16, seeded 29th, ranked 32nd in the world, without a single WTA singles title to her name. That is the anomaly here. That is the actual story, more than any single scoreline. And the numbers back up the idea that this was not just a feeling inside one stadium. Start with the YouTube figures, because they prove this was happening globally, not just in those seats. More than 1.2 million views on the Swiatek highlight reel by Monday morning on Wimbledon's own official channel. More than double the numbers pulled by Djokovic and Serena Williams' content from the same tournament window. Whatever was happening on center court had already been happening on screens around the world for 2 straight days, and the people who paid to sit in those seats on Monday were, in a very real sense, simply confirming out loud what the internet had already decided over the weekend. Then there's a ranking gap, which matters because it shows how unlikely this adoption really was on paper. Eala arrived at this Wimbledon seated 29th. Her actual world ranking sat at 32. Her career prize money at that point was reported at just over $871,000. She had 0 WTA singles titles to her name. Paolini, on the other hand, walked in as a 13th seed, with a French Open final and a Wimbledon final already sitting on her resume. And even with that gap in accomplishment, the crowd still chose a newcomer. Not because Paolini had done anything to lose their favor, but because Eala had done something in the previous 48 hours that nobody in those seats could stop replaying in their heads. There's also a head-to-head thread running underneath all of this, and it explains why Paolini walked out onto that court more wary than her ranking would suggest she should have been. Their only previous meeting had come earlier in 2026 at the WTA 1000 event in Dubai, on hard court, and Eala had won it comfortably 6-1, 7-6. That defeat sent Paolini out in the second round of that event. There's footage of her congratulating Eala afterward with real, visible warmth, no bitterness in it at all. That context matters here, because it means Paolini walked onto center court knowing she had already lost to this exact opponent once this year, and knowing the crowd was not going to be pulling for her the way it usually did on this lawn. She won anyway. That resilience is a part of this story that a punchy headline can flatten out, and it deserves better than that. Take a breath here, because the middle of a 3-set match on grass in 31-degree heat resists a tidy narrative, and it should. What Eala did in that second set was genuinely gritty tennis. She fought off 3 break points early in the set that could have ended her chances right there. Then she turned around and broke Paolini's serve. and serve out the set to level the match at 1 set apiece. At that exact point in the afternoon, the two players had won almost the same number of total points, separated by a single point after roughly 90 minutes of tennis. And this, more than any single shot, is where the emotional peak of the day actually lived. Not at match point, not at any one highlight reel winner. It lived in the noise the stadium made the instant it realized this match was headed to a deciding third set. That noise, let's go Alex, rolling around a court most of those fans had never sat in before hearing that name, is the sound of a crowd being surprised by its own preference in real time. Most of the people in those seats had bought their tickets weeks, sometimes months, earlier. Statistically, very few of them had any personal connection to the Philippines. What they were doing live in front of each other was choosing. They were watching a player almost none of them had heard a year earlier and deciding out loud that they wanted her to win. Paolini had already said, before the match even started, that she expected the crowd to be behind Eala. What she probably could not have fully prepared for was just how strongly that support would show up this early in the tournament, on this exact court. And then, because tennis is not a sentimental sport no matter how loud a crowd gets, the third set arrived and the serve arrived with it. A crowd can lift you, carry you through nerves, cover for a bad game here and there, but on grass, against a player Paolini's level, it can only take you so far before the mechanics of the sport take back control. In the decider, at 4-3 down, Eala's first serve, which had been a genuine weapon of hers throughout the season, started to abandon her almost entirely, at one stage dipping as low as around 65 miles an hour on a crucial point. Paolini, meanwhile, did the opposite. Her first serve percentage climbed sharply in that final set, and she started converting an overwhelming majority of those first serve points. She held again. And after 2 hours and 22 minutes on court, she served out the match, with Roger Federer applauding from the royal box. Listen to what each player said afterward, because the sequence of those two speeches is really the honest ending of this story. Far more honest than the instant regret narrative that headlines like to reach for. Paolini, speaking to the crowd right there on court, called it really tough, a roller coaster, and said 2026 had taught her a lot. She talked about the tough moments, about leaning on her team, about feeling better every day she competes again. She said the most important thing to her is staying positive and actually enjoying her tennis, that she loves what she does, and that joy is her superpower. That is not the language of someone who left the court angry at a crowd that had cheered for someone else. That is the language of a player who understands deeply that this particular stadium picks whoever it wants to pick on any given afternoon, and who has decided her only real job is to keep playing good tennis regardless. Now listen to Eala from her press conference that same day, and you hear the same kind of maturity from the other side of the net. She talked about handling pressure well, about staying cool when she needed to, and then asked about the things that went wrong. She said something that explains exactly why a crowd falls for a player like this. She said, of course, there are things you would like to do differently, but in the end, that is just tennis. And that is also what is beautiful about tennis, that every match is different, that you are always looking for solutions while your opponent is looking for ways to make you uncomfortable, and that Paolini had done that well that day. She admitted her serve had not been as good as usual, but said everyone has days like that it is part of the job, and that she does not expect to play her best tennis every single time she steps on court. She is 21 years old. That is a composure of someone far beyond her years, and it is exactly the kind of composure that makes a crowd want to keep watching you. Zoom out from center court for a second, because the scale of what Eala accomplished deserves to be stated plainly, without embellishment, because it genuinely does not need any. She became the first player from the Philippines, in either the men's or women's draw, to reach the fourth round of Grand Slam in the Open era, a period of tennis history stretching back to 1968. That is 58 years without a Filipino name reaching the stage of a major tournament, ended in 1 week, on one court, by a 21-year-old who had been ranked around 140 in the world roughly a year before this tournament even started. The reaction back home was immediate and enormous. The Philippine president spoke publicly in praise of her run. Watch parties were organized around the country to follow her matches live and online. The numbers kept climbing well past that first weekend, with well over 1 million views on that single highlight video alone by the star.